Thank you so very much. It just goes to show you when you talk about AARP that many years ago, and Kelly Jander and all the ladies and gentlemen who put this together, what one simple idea and a goal, you know, they only expected a few hundred people. How many do we have? 700 people here today? There you have it, the power. Kansas City, we take great pride in being an attractive city for millennials and entrepreneurs. Wouldn't it be great if we could also strive to be a great city for older adults or for older entrepreneurs? Our next speaker will challenge us to think about just that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce to you Paul Tasner. He is the co-founder and CEO of Pulpworks, Inc. Now, his company, Pattern Packaging Technology, has won numerous awards and has helped reduce waste in our landfills. His TED Talk, Becoming an Entrepreneur, at guess what age? 66 years of age, was named one of the top 5 TED Talks that will change your perspective on aging. And thank you so much, Paul, for coming all the way from San Francisco. Thank you so much.
I was afraid I'd have to look at my portrait for the entire speech, so mercifully I don't. But I did want to share a little backstory with you about 70 over 70. I did give a TED Talk, as you just heard. It was about 18 months ago, and the closing line of my TED Talk was, let's make 70 over 70 as commonplace as 30 under 30. And the audience applauded wildly, and everything was lovely. And then after my talk, some of my friends and colleagues encouraged me to trademark the name 70 over 70, which I did. And so I'm here to share with you that you are all in violation of my trademark. We'll try to work something out. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is truly an honor. I have several topics to cover with you today. Entrepreneurism, ageism, and the plastic pollution of our planet. They don't all seem to be related to each other, but they are related to each other through me. So I think this will become clear as I speak. I am a proud first-time entrepreneur. I was 66 years old when I launched my business. The business is called Pulpworks. I'm 73 years old now. Prior to that time, I had spent 40 years in various supply chain management roles with several companies, large and small. My last employer struggled through the recession and reduced the workforce several times. Eventually, that included me. I was fired at the age of 64. So I pursued some consulting opportunities. I mean, I had 40 years of experience. I had good contacts, and I needed to work. But I had no passion for it, and I felt the need to do something about which I felt passion. Frankly, I felt as if time was running out, in a sense. So Pulpworks turned out to be an ideal concept for me. It was entrepreneurial, but it was also deeply rooted in my own employment experience. A little bit about the business. We design and manufacture sustainable packaging for consumer products. Our packaging is composed entirely of waste, paper and agricultural waste. And our mission is the replacement of unnecessary plastic packaging with compostable and biodegradable alternatives. And I underscore unnecessary. I mean, some plastic packaging is obviously wonderful and necessary. Let's talk about waste just for a second. I realize you're all eating, so I don't want to dwell on it. We'll talk about plastic waste. So just the U.S. comprises 5% of our planet's population. We create 25% of our planet's waste. That includes 70 billion pounds of CO2 equivalent every year. So you might think perhaps we should be better recyclers. That's actually a lot of bull. I think we're good recyclers. People want to recycle. We don't have an infrastructure for all of our recycling. And we should be better designers of packaging so that we don't create as many wasteful, disposable, single-use plastic packages. The burden's not on us. It's on business and government. It's not on us as citizens. We need to replace unnecessary plastic packaging. You're probably familiar from watching the news from time to time. There's an island in the Pacific. Actually, there are islands in all of the planet's oceans. There's an island in the Pacific. It's called the North Pacific Gyre. Some say it's twice the size of Texas. It's all plastic. And that plastic washes up on beaches on the west coast of the U.S., particularly in Hawaii. There's a landfill in Rio de Janeiro that is the size of 247 football fields and a 30-story building. And I think you're all familiar with the fact that China has just decided they don't want our waste anymore. They create enough of their own, and they get waste from other sources as well. So our plastic recycling on this planet was at 9.1%, which is really dreadful. But it's going to get worse. It's going to be in the 4% range this year, and next year it's predicted to be 2.9%. That is beyond bad. I mean, that is a tragedy. So it's not its production of plastic that needs to be really monitored carefully. Here's how profound our corporate addiction to plastic is. In the course of business, we had a meeting with I won't mention their name, but they're a large cosmetic company, starts with the letter L, and they're based in Paris. So it was a very good meeting, actually. We were kind of excited to see where it would go, and at the end of the meeting, the principal person meeting with us said, "We love what you're doing, but if your packaging is 1/10 of a penny more than what we're currently buying, we can't use it." I was really profoundly shocked. 1/10 of a penny, and they couldn't figure a way to work it out. Again, last year I was privileged to spend 4 months in New York City as what's called a TED resident. And on June 6th of last year, I delivered a TED Talk on these very same topics. I've been talking to anyone who will listen about my business since 2011, but since then, I now talk about entrepreneurism and ageism, and frankly, I know a lot less about those subjects than I do about packaging. I've had invitations ranging from my granddaughter's Girl Scout troop, it was a really tough crowd, and the World Trade Center in Moscow. I talk about the challenges of launching a venture as a senior citizen. It was my first attempt at being an entrepreneur. I had 40 years of experience, but none as an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs look for investors, generally. My business is self-funded. We didn't choose that. We simply couldn't raise the money. We were turned down many, many times. Too old, sadly, was often the excuse, either unspoken and sometimes spoken. I live in San Francisco. Investors have much better opportunities than a company turning garbage into packaging in San Francisco. At least they think they do. I think they all believe they'll be the next lead investor in the next Facebook or Twitter. And that's a tough mindset to compete with, for dollars at least. So, I had geography, category, experience, and my age all running against me, frankly. I want to share with you a couple of my favorite encounters with investors, and I say favorite really in quotes. They're only favorites because they were so profound. They certainly weren't positive experiences. The first one was an investor group that we pitched our story to, and we got a follow-up message from one of the investors in the audience, and that was pretty exciting. That hadn't happened until then, and he asked if I would come to his office and talk further about the opportunity. Obviously, I was very, very excited. I got to his office, and he proceeded to lecture me on doing what I was doing. Things like, you're too old to be doing this. You should be playing golf, enjoying your retirement. And I really don't like golf, and I need an income. So that's not a great path for me. I asked him why he invited me to his office just to lecture me this way. And here's the interesting thing about this story. I think you can all relate to this. When you have an encounter with someone and it's a bit tense, and often you don't think of saying what you really wanted to say, or maybe you're just too diplomatic to say it, but and then you think of it the next night or 2 nights later. Why didn't I say that, or why didn't I say that? That happens all the time. I'm sure it's happened to everyone here. Well, that didn't happen this time. I did think of what I wanted to say, and I'm really proud to share it with you. I said to him, you could have sent me an email. He said, well, I thought I would make a more compelling argument if I had you here in front of me. And really? And he said, well, you're a local guy. What difference does it make? And that's when I said, well, I'll tell you, here's the difference. If you had sent me an email, I would have been disappointed, maybe even angry, but in a week or 2 or 4, I would have forgotten about it and forgotten about you. But because you basically interrupted my day to humiliate me, I'm going to remember what an ass you are for the rest of my life. He was older than me. Honestly, he was older than me. The other anecdote, it was the last time we pitched for investment capital. I remember it very clearly. It was at the offices of LinkedIn in Mountain View, California. And I was asked to tell my story along with 2 young fellas, both of whom were younger than my youngest son. But they had interesting ventures. They were, of course, tech ventures. And we all told our story, and then the leader of the group said, I'd like to ask you gentlemen to stand behind this table, and I'd like to ask all the investors in the room to line up in front of the entrepreneur that you have more questions for. Everyone in that room lined up in front of those two young guys. There was nobody standing in front of me. And it really felt humiliating. The young fella next to me said something very encouraging, you know, I think you've got a cool idea, dude, you know, and I said, thanks. Well, maybe I should come to you for funding. But honestly, it was really humiliating, and I made a pledge to myself after that evening that I just wasn't going to do this anymore. You know, I don't think, and I haven't heard it said here yet this evening, but I've heard it said many times, that older entrepreneurs have an amazing success rate, and it makes perfect sense. I think I read that our success rate is 70% when launching a new venture. And that number is way smaller for younger entrepreneurs, which is also understandable. I mean, 70% success rate, that's, you know, we're like the Golden State Warriors of entrepreneurs. Seriously. Well, the money we were going to raise was to build a manufacturing facility, and we obviously couldn't do that. So we turned to outsourcing our manufacturing, and I turned to people that I knew from my previous life. And I'm delighted to share with you that two of those partners of ours, both overseas, are the reason that I'm able to stand here and tell this story today. They told us that we could pay them after we got paid. And that's pretty major when you're in business. And that kind of trust and generosity has created a lifelong bond between us, and they will always be our partners as a result of that. Just as a postscript, we are doing fairly well. We have well-known customers: Google, Campbell's Soup, Casper Sleep, Burt's Bees, Groupon, Energizer. They're not all huge projects, but we're pretty excited. My TED Talk has been translated into 28 languages and has reached about 2 million people. I've received literally thousands of responses from around the world. Heartwarming messages, all of them. Some of them really heartbreaking messages. People of all ages, but primarily seniors, telling me that I've inspired them. I got one that actually implied that I saved his life. I mean, that is overwhelming. Honestly, I don't even know how to begin to wrap my arms around it. That is really overwhelming to, you know, one day you're this person, you give a speech, and the next day you're apparently another person. I don't know how else to describe it, but I just had no idea what to expect about stepping out on that stage at TED. I know if you're like me, you probably feel fortunate if you inspire someone, a child, a friend, in the course of your life. Can you imagine inspiring dozens, perhaps even hundreds of people? It's really humbling. I mean that, profoundly humbling. And I can honestly say that I am doing the most rewarding and challenging work of my life right now, and I'm incredibly grateful to be able to do that. I've had good jobs throughout my career, but this is by far the best work I've ever done, and it's a wonderful feeling. I'd like to tell you, Kansas City is actually near and dear to me. My wife grew up here, and she went to St. Luke's for her nursing degree, and oh wow. And her first job was at Children's Mercy Hospital. She's very proud of that. Very proud of that. My oldest son lives here. He lives in Lawrence and works in Leawood, and we've got extended family all over the area. Honestly, I even like the Royals. And also Kansas City, obviously, you all know, Kansas City's home to the Kaufman Foundation, an amazing organization. Kaufman's 1 Million Cups program, designed to educate, engage, and inspire entrepreneurs, is truly superb. I'd like to share with you a couple of kind of pearls of wisdom that I've encountered on this new journey of mine. So if you give me a second. Eric Erickson, developmental psychologist, has said, as we grow older, hunger for meaning animates us, making us more alive. Creating something new isn't just a nice thing to do, it's a psychological imperative. The urge to create, to generate a life that counts, impels people to innovate even when it's lonely and scary. And another marvelous quote, jazz musician Herbie Hancock, an icon, your youthful spirit is not something that goes away as you get older or even diminishes as you get older. What happens is you let it go to sleep. So many people just buy into being old. You can age, of course, we all age, but you can keep that youthful spirit alive. And I want to share, I think, one of the most interesting messages that I got after my TED Talk, because it was really an unusual one. It was from an insurance company, a very large life insurance company based in the Netherlands. They're known as Transamerica here in the US, but worldwide they're called Aegon. And I got a call from two researchers, and we had a rather lengthy conversation. The content of it was they wanted me to know that what I was doing was the absolute best way to flourish in your senior years. And I said, really? Talking to colleagues in China at 3 a.m. is the best thing to do? He said, obviously. So, no, they insisted that, starting a venture and with the challenges that it brings is just incredibly wonderful food for your spirit. Exercise is good, of course. It's essential for cardiopulmonary health and also for your spirit. I know that for a fact. But to really feed your mind, your spirit, beginning something challenging like this is really marvelous. So, ladies and gentlemen, launch a venture and feed your spirit. Thank you.